Robert Harrison, oil billionaire with a $4 billion empire, was concluding the most important meeting of the year in his office on the 47th floor of Harrison Tower in Manhattan when an 8-year-old boy burst into the boardroom. It was Marcus, son of Maria, the Mexican janitor who cleaned the building at night. The child had his backpack on his shoulders, a worn teddy bear in hand, and tears in his eyes because his mother had been rushed to the hospital. The three business partners started laughing at the small intruder, but Robert stood up furiously to kick him out. It was then that Marcus, trembling with fear, whispered the words that would change everything. "I speak 9 languages. Maybe I can help with your business." The partners burst into even louder laughter, but Robert was stunned when the boy began speaking perfect classical Arabic, then Mandarin, Russian, German, and French, even correcting translation errors in million-dollar contracts scattered on the table. What nobody knew was that Marcus was hiding a secret that would shake the Harrison empire and reveal a devastating truth about the billionaire's past. Maria Gonzalez arrived in New York 7 years earlier with a cardboard suitcase, a 1-year-old son in her arms, and a heart broken by an abusive marriage in a small town in Mexico. The night janitor job at Harrison Tower paid enough to allow her to raise Marcus alone, even though it meant cleaning 50 floors of offices from 10 at night to 6 in the morning, sleeping during the day while the boy attended the free international daycare for immigrant workers' children. What made Marcus extraordinary wasn't a divine gift, but the pure necessity of urban survival in New York. The daycare was attended by children of Filipinos, Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, Russians, Chinese, Nigerians, Brazilians, and French families, all children of immigrant workers who spoke their parents' language at home. Marcus, with the natural curiosity of childhood and an absolute ear for sounds, began absorbing those languages like a thirsty sponge. At 3 years old, he spoke Spanish with his mother, Arabic with Emirate classmates, English with teachers, Tagalog with Elena, the Filipino nanny. At 5, he had added Mandarin, playing with Lynn, Russian with Dmitri, Hindi with Priya. At 7, he also knew German and French, learned from Klaus, the German night doorman, and Madame Sophie, the French consul's wife, who lived on the 40th floor. But Marcus didn't just speak the languages. He studied them obsessively, understanding grammatical structures with precision that amazed adults. He spent hours in the daycare library, comparing translations, memorizing proverbs, analyzing how each language expressed different concepts. Maria often found him asleep on books, with dictionaries open around him like toys. The boy had also developed photographic memory for numbers and documents, probably because he accompanied Maria to work on weekends when there was no one to leave him with. While his mother cleaned, Marcus wandered through empty offices, observing contracts, graphs, presentations. Without realizing it, he was absorbing the language of international business, learning technical terms in 9 different languages. Robert Harrison was completely unaware of this prodigy child living in the shadow of his empire. At 42, he had transformed his father's inherited company into a colossus spanning from oil to technology. He was married to Catherine, a socialite from old Boston money, but their marriage was more a business alliance than love. They had no children, and Robert had always thought it was better that way. Marcus knew every corner of Harrison Tower better than anyone else. He knew that Robert had 3 safes hidden behind paintings, that the most important contracts were in the locked drawer of the main desk, that decisive meetings took place in the 47th floor boardroom. The boy had acquired an understanding of international markets that many adults take years to develop, simply by observing and listening in the silence of night. The morning that changed everything began when Maria woke up with chest pain she could no longer ignore. She had hidden symptoms of heart palpitations for weeks, but was forced to admit she needed immediate medical care. When she arrived at the hospital and was admitted urgently, Marcus made the bravest decision of his young life. He knew only one place where his mother worked, only one person he associated with power and money: the mysterious Mr. Harrison from the penthouse. With childhood's simple logic, he thought if he could convince that powerful man to help his mother, everything would be solved. He took the bus he knew by heart, entered the tower using Maria's access card, and went directly to the 47th floor, where he knew important meetings took place. Robert was about to sign the most important contract of his career when the boardroom door burst open. The agreement with the Russians for oil extraction in the Caspian Sea was worth $2 billion and had required 6 months of intense negotiations. Around the table sat his partners Michael Wright and David Sterling, along with representatives from ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Total. When he saw an 8-year-old boy burst into the most secure room in the skyscraper, Robert initially thought of a security error. The child had his backpack on his shoulders, a worn teddy bear in hand, and eyes shiny with barely contained tears. He was small even for his age, with brown hair and intense dark eyes that seemed to contain intelligence disproportionate to his fragile body. The partners immediately started laughing, thinking it was an amusing joke or misunderstanding. Robert stood up furiously, ready to call security. It was at that moment that Marcus, trembling with fear but driven by desperation, whispered the words that would change both their destinies. "I speak 9 languages. Maybe I can help." Robert's first reaction was total disbelief. But when Marcus began speaking classical Arabic, not the street dialect, but the pure language of ancient Bedouin poetry that only the most refined scholars knew, silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket. Then the boy switched to Mandarin, correcting a translation error in the Chinese contract that no one had noticed. The ExxonMobil representative paled when Marcus explained in perfect Mandarin that the term used in Article 47 completely changed the meaning of the royalty agreement. It wasn't a random error, but a subtle modification that would have cost Harrison Holdings $50 million over 10 years. Russian came fluid and precise, like that of a Moscow diplomat. Marcus explained that the International Sanctions Clause contained a dangerous legal loophole. The man from Chevron, who had tried to sneak that clause in, was left speechless when a child dismantled his strategy in 3 sentences. But it was when Marcus began speaking German and French that Robert understood he was facing something extraordinary. The boy didn't just translate. He analyzed, criticized, suggested modifications that demonstrated understanding of international markets that was staggering for any age. The partners stopped laughing when they realized that Child was saving them hundreds of millions of dollars by identifying errors and traps that $1,000-an-hour lawyers hadn't seen. The French representative asked Marcus where he had studied international commercial law. The boy's answer left them breathless. "I haven't studied, sir. I just listened a lot." Robert felt like he was dreaming. In 30 years of international business, he had never met anyone with such linguistic mastery and commercial understanding. It was when Marcus began crying, explaining that his mother was in the hospital and he didn't know what to do, that Robert understood the devastating truth. This prodigy child was the son of Maria, the janitor who cleaned his offices at night, a woman who to him was little more than a shadow. And that boy had grown up in the shadow of his world without him noticing, absorbing commercial secrets like other children absorb bedtime stories. After the most surreal meeting of his life, Robert personally accompanied Marcus to Mount Sinai Hospital. During the trip, the boy told his story with that disarming simplicity of childhood. Without realizing, he was describing one of the most extraordinary learning journeys ever documented. Maria was admitted to the cardiac unit with a diagnosis of stress-induced heart palpitations. When Robert entered the room, the woman stood up terrified of losing her job due to her son's intrusion. But Robert immediately reassured her, explaining that Marcus had just saved his company hundreds of millions of dollars. In the following days emerged the story of a single mother who had raised a genius son without realizing it. Maria worked nights to allow Marcus to study during the day, but what she didn't know was that the boy never slept completely when she wasn't there. He always woke up at 3 in the morning and studied until dawn, driven by an insatiable hunger for knowledge. Robert began visiting them daily, bringing documents in different languages and complex contracts. Each time Marcus analyzed them with precision that left experienced consultants stunned. The boy didn't just translate, he reasoned about contents with disconcerting maturity, identifying errors that no engineer had seen. But what struck Robert was the naturalness with which Marcus switched from one language to another. The boy explained that each language had a different taste in his head. Arabic tasted of sand and stars, Chinese of green tea, Russian of snow and fire, German of precision. Robert began involving Marcus in daily activities, first out of curiosity, then as real consultation. The boy participated in international video calls, correcting professional translators' errors with embarrassing naturalness. Robert's transformation was gradual but profound. The man who had built an empire on distrust found himself listening to advice from a child who saw the world with disarming clarity. Week after week, Robert modified his habits. Instead of lunches at luxury restaurants, he ate sandwiches with Marcus and Maria at the hospital, discussing strategies while the boy colored drawings that often contained brilliant insights. Instead of endless meetings with expensive consultants, he asked Marcus's opinion.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
Who often solved complex problems with innocent logic. Wife Catherine noticed the change in her husband. Robert always talked about the extraordinary child and his advice. Initially, she thought of a midlife crisis, but when she saw Robert smile for the first time in years, while showing her a drawing Marcus had made, she understood something profound was happening. What Robert didn't know was that Marcus was changing not just his approach to business, but his understanding of life itself. When Maria was discharged after 2 weeks, Robert offered the family an apartment in the residential complex reserved for executives, with the condition that Marcus continue to consult for the company. The new apartment had 3 bedrooms with a view of Central Park, but what made that place special was the library Robert had set up for Marcus. Thousands of books in 9 languages, specialized dictionaries, economics manuals adapted for children. Robert began spending more time with them than in his penthouse. He justified himself saying he needed to train his consultant, but the truth was, he felt more at home in that apartment. Maria cooked Mexican dishes that awakened childhood memories, when his paternal grandmother prepared homemade tortillas. Marcus unofficially became part of the executive team. Robert brought him to important meetings, where the boy sat silently taking notes that he translated into accurate reports. International partners began requesting the presence of the little translator after he had saved them millions in losses. The real change occurred when Robert began seeing the world through Marcus's eyes. The boy asked innocent questions that revealed profound contradictions. Why do we build luxury hotels if most people can't afford them? Why do we buy oil from countries that mistreat workers? These questions began digging into Robert's soul. He realized he had built an empire without ever really asking what it was for. Marcus was teaching him that power without purpose is empty, that success without compassion is sterile. Robert implemented changes that stunned analysts and competitors, increased wages by 30%, established scholarships, started sustainable projects that sacrificed immediate profits. It was during a dinner that Robert had the most important epiphany. Marcus had prepared a drawing of all 3 together, with the inscription, "My Family," in 9 different languages. Looking at that drawing, Robert found himself crying for the first time in 20 years. Maria found him in the living room, clutching the drawing to his chest. Robert confessed he had never had a real family. A marriage of convenience, parents who saw him only as heir, friends interested in money. But with them, he finally felt at home. That night, he made the most important decision. He would divorce Catherine and ask Maria to marry him, for the first time, for true love. But Maria had a secret that completely changed the situation. She told him that Marcus wasn't the son of an abusive marriage in Mexico, as she had always said. The boy was born in New York, in a private clinic, from a relationship with Robert's father, Harrison Sr., who had died 5 years earlier in a plane crash. Maria had been his personal secretary for 2 years, the only person who managed to see beyond the powerful businessman's facade. When Maria discovered she was pregnant, she decided to disappear from Harrison Sr.'s life without telling him anything. She knew he would want to recognize the child, but this would have destroyed his family and reputation. Robert remained silent for hours, processing that Marcus was his half-brother. Suddenly, everything made sense. The boy's extraordinary intelligence, his innate understanding of business, even physical traits he now recognized as familiar. When Robert told Marcus the truth, the boy didn't seem surprised. With wisdom beyond his years, he simply said, "I knew you were my family." Documents weren't needed to feel it. Robert took legal steps to recognize Marcus as his brother and heir to the Harrison family. The boy officially became Marcus Harrison, junior partner of Harrison Holdings, with an office furnished with low desk and the title of Chief Linguistic Consultant that made all employees smile. Maria was promoted to Director of Human Resources, using her sensitivity to improve working conditions. It was she who proposed the Marcus Program, scholarships for immigrant workers' children with special talents, transforming personal history into opportunities for hundreds of children. The divorce from Catherine was surprisingly amicable. She admitted being happy to finally marry her secret lover, a senator she had been courting for years. Marcus adapted to his new status with childhood's natural ease. He continued living with Maria, but now had a big brother who took him around the world for business meetings that were mainly excuses to travel together. Robert discovered the joy of seeing the world through a child's eyes. Every city had different flavors for Marcus, every culture secrets to discover. The company prospered under family management. Competitors couldn't understand how Harrison Holdings had become so efficient, not knowing their ace in the hole was a boy who translated not just words, but hidden intentions. Marcus had maintained his simplicity despite international fame. He continued playing with old friends, brought his worn teddy bear on important trips, and asked questions that often solved million-dollar problems with innocent logic. Robert had completely transformed his empire following principles Marcus unconsciously taught him. Business as a tool for human connection instead of exploitation. Maria had become one of the most respected businesswomen in America, directing a program that identified prodigy children worldwide. The Marcus Project had changed the lives of over 1,000 children in 47 countries, offering educational opportunities their parents could never afford. But what remained unchanged was Marcus's ability to see beyond the barriers adults built. In a world divided by cultural conflicts, he had become living proof that mutual understanding was possible. Robert had found something all the billions couldn't buy: a real family, born from the purest love, that which grows from helping each other become better versions of themselves. 5 years later, Harrison Holdings had become one of the world's most respected companies, not just for profits, but for its revolutionary approach to international business. Marcus, now 13, was a legend, the 9 languages boy, who had transformed communication from obstacle into opportunity. His influence went beyond translation. Marcus had developed what media called child diplomacy, solving commercial conflicts with adolescent sincerity. When companies fought, often just a simple question from Marcus revealed they were battling over easily resolvable misunderstandings. Robert had transformed the empire following principles unconsciously taught by Marcus. Harrison Holdings invested in sustainable development, international education, technologies to improve common life. Profits were enormous, but now had meaning beyond wealth accumulation. Maria directed an international program for prodigy children. The Marcus Project had changed thousands of children's lives worldwide, offering educational opportunities unthinkable for their families. The relationship between Robert and Marcus had evolved into a unique partnership, experience and connections on one side, fresh perspective, and linguistic ability on the other. Together they traveled not as rich tourists, but as ambassadors of a new way of doing business based on mutual understanding. Marcus maintained his simplicity despite international fame. Same apartment with Maria, same childhood friends, same teddy bear on the most important trips. On the evening of his 13th birthday, sitting on the terrace watching the sunset over Manhattan, Robert asked Marcus about his dream. The answer still surprised him. He wanted to build a school where children from around the world learned each other's languages, not for profit, but for mutual understanding, because he had discovered that when you speak someone's language, you can't hate them anymore. Robert smiled, recognizing the wisdom he had learned to respect. That night he updated his will, leaving most of his fortune to the Marcus Project and the future school. Not because he didn't trust Marcus with the empire, but because he knew his brother had found something more precious, his life's purpose. Harrison Holdings continued to prosper under the brothers' joint leadership, becoming an example of how business could connect instead of exploit. Marcus continued to grow, adding languages to his repertoire, now 11, and depth to his understanding of the world. But his ability to see beyond the barriers adults built remained unchanged. Every time someone asked the secret of success, Marcus answered with the same simplicity. I learned it doesn't matter what language someone says, I love you, or I'm scared in. What matters is listening with your heart, not just your ears. The story of the boy who said, I speak 9 languages, had taught the world that miracles are born in the humblest places, that intelligence without love is empty, but love with intelligence can change the world one conversation at a time. Robert had found not just a brother, but a family that taught him true power doesn't lie in dominating, but in understanding, and that sometimes 9 languages and a pure heart are enough to build bridges where others see only walls. Like if you believe children see the world more clearly than adults, comment which moment moved you the most. Share to inspire those who believe in the power of words to unite peoples. Subscribe for more stories of hidden talents that change the world. Sometimes geniuses grow in the shadows, waiting just to be seen. Sometimes the most beautiful families are born where you least expect them. And sometimes 9 languages and a pure heart are enough to conquer an empire built on understanding instead of fear. Because in the end, it doesn't matter what language you say family in, what matters is the warmth that word brings with it.